Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're doing a bit of a fun one because as you guys all know, recently BTS has shut down. Not that that's the fun part of the video, that's obviously very sad, but with that means there's going to be no more summits. There's a lot of amazing players that never got the chance to showcase themselves at a summit, so that's what we're going to be doing for today's video. We're going to be going over the 16 best players that were never at a summit and going over what a bracket with all those players might look like. And this was not an idea made by me, this was a comment by Tlanesi, I believe that's how you say it, so huge shouts to them because this is a really fun idea, and let's just get right into it. Before we actually talk about the final 16 people, I just want to give mention to Gak, Takaru, and Lima because they were the three people that I almost put in there. I just barely didn't, just because I think the other people above them have a little bit higher accolades or have been doing a little bit better as of late. But if you want to put any of these guys in here, I could 100% see that. I also think a lot of players from Mexico, like Waka and Aladis specifically, are probably the two strongest ones from there, and Shiny Mark as well. But again, they don't really have enough results for me to justify putting them above all these other people who have either like won majors, top 8 multiple times, overperformed a lot of tournaments. So wanted to give honorable mentions to all those guys, but they're not actually going to be in the final bracket. So my 16 players are Lugi, Tilde, Siski, Jackal, Quid, Hiro, Yara, Zomba, Kameme, Bloom Forever, Osimo, Yoshidora, Onin, Mia, Shuton, and Sonics. Now really quickly, I'll go over the seeding. The only reason I have 16th being Lugi is just because he hasn't proven himself as much as the other players, but that's kind of just because he hasn't had the opportunity to, but he does have a major win under his belt, as well as recently getting wins on Bloom Forever and Gluttony, so Lugi definitely deserving to be here, maybe should be seated a little bit higher. You have Tilde at 15th. His 2023 year hasn't been super amazing. This kind of applies to Siski as well, but their 2022 years were so strong that I can't not put them on there, and they both still do have decent wins within this year. You have Siski, his most notable win probably being on Gluttony at a regional last weekend, or rather 2 weekends ago, which is very strong. And then Tilde had a pretty good Let's Make Big Moves. Like, it wasn't insane, but I think it was like 17th or something, which is definitely a solid placement. And these are two guys that could and will probably top 8 majors later on in the year. You have Jackal just recently getting his first top 8 this year at Major Upset. He is an incredible player, extremely underrated as well because there's so many amazing Wolf players out there. I feel like you don't really talk about Jackal as much, but Jackal is insane. Probably still the best Wolf in the world right now. I would argue for it as much as I love Ouch and Torier is crazy. I think Jackal's results are just too good, as well as having that top 8 at Major Upset. In 12th, you have Quid. Now, Quid's also someone that hasn't really proven himself this year. He had an okay Let's Make Big Moves, pretty good collision, had a nice losers run there. But aside from that, he hasn't done anything super crazy, but we know from that Let's Make Big Moves that he won, he is definitely a top tier caliber player, and when he is playing good, Quid is one of the scariest people in the world, so I'm comfortable putting him at that 12th seed. Before we get to Hiro though, I do want to give a shout out to MK Big Boss, because he was just someone that I forgot to put in my honorable mentions, and I'm not going to put him in now just because I have all my brackets already completed, but if you want to put MK Big Boss in this top 16, I think that's definitely valid because he is a crazy good player. But on to Hiro and Yara, they've kind of been doing very well in Japan right now. They have kind of mixed results here and there, but their peaks are incredible. You have Hiro getting second places at majors. He top 8 at Kagaribi as well, had some banger sets, has a bunch of amazing wins along the way, and then Yara as well has also had multiple top 8s, as well as a win on Proto Bonham fairly recently, which is super impressive because, you know, Proto Bonham is like a top 10 player in the world when he's like actually playing and has results. So Yara and Hiro are both incredible players. At 9th place, I have Zomba. Now, Zomba hasn't had an amazing start to 2023, but his 2022 was incredible, as well as still having a 9th place at Collision. He won a regional over DeBuzz as well fairly recently, which is very good. I'd still say the best Rob in the world, even though MK Big Boss, again, shouts to him, has been doing very well as of late, as well as Anathema being a constant threat, but Anathema has already been to a summit, so we're not going to worry about that. In number 8, I have Kameme. Now, Kameme also been fairly quiet in 2023, not because he's been underperforming though, just because he hasn't really been going to anything. Did very well at Tsubigeki though, and then if we looked at 2022 results, he was farming that year, definitely the best Sora in the world right now. He is absolutely incredible and definitely deserving of that summit spot in the top 8 as well. Now, these final 7 players have all been very impressive, and I think all have an argument for top 10 in the world right now, starting off with Bloom Forever, who is the lowest, not because I think he should be the lowest rank, but because he has the lowest amount of results. Bloom does not have a major yet this year. He has been winning every single thing he's been going to, and that's some big regionals with wins over Gluto, Lugi, Siski as well, so those are all things to consider, but just because he doesn't have the results quite yet, I'm going to be putting him below players like Osimo and Yoshidora. Speaking of Osimo, he is crazy. He's been having one of the best best years of his life. I mean, he's kind of popped off in 2022, but he carried that momentum super hard into 2023 with an amazing Kagaribi. Like, that run was incredible, as well as a really strong losers run at Maizuma. Asimo is definitely a top threat in this game right now that doesn't really get talked about enough, but someone that gets talked about a lot and is a hot topic right now is Yoshidora. Even though he hasn't been going to a ton of stuff, when he does go to something, he typically does very well. I'd say his best run this year is going to be at Umebura, which was really strong, got a 3rd place there. Yoshidora is crazy. We're going to finally see him in the US, or rather in Canada, at Battle of BC, which is going to be super hype. So definitely deserving of that top 5 spot. If you want to kind of change around Bloom forever, Asimo and Yoshidora's order, though, I wouldn't really mind it too much. And for the top 4, I think it should be some order of Onin, Mia, Shuton, and Sonic. Sonic's being at number 1. It's kind of like we have our 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse here, starting off with Onin. Now, Onin doesn't have any really results in 2023. He's won a couple regionals, did okay at Let's Make Big Moves, but if you look at his performances in 2022, he has some of the most insane results. He's did well at basically every event he went to. He won the biggest event of the year in Super Smash Con, at least in terms of rating. I think LSI was a little bit harder to win, but in terms of a rating, he did take that event as well over players like Leo, Light, Meister. Like, he got so many amazing wins along the way, and Onin is just such a ridiculous player that we haven't seen a little bit. Again, another player at Battle BC that I think we're seeing, which would be incredibly hype, so keep your eyes out for him. And then speaking of Battle of BC, you got Mia. That's going to be his first kind of super major in the US, and I'm really excited to see how he does because he has been tearing it up in Japan. The only reason I have him below Shuton is just because his first 2 majors of the year were really lackluster, but everything since then has been very good. And then for Shuton as well, he also didn't have an amazing start to the year, did pretty good at Umebura, underperformed at his next 2 events, but he actually won Kowloon 5 over Mia, which is another reason why I'm going to put Shuton over Mia, and then number 1 being Sonics is just because Sonics is a top 6 player in the world. Now, our first pool has Sonics, Kameme, Zomba, and Lugi, and for Lugi, it's a little bit interesting because he hasn't actually played against any of these people before, but he does have some character matchups in Europe that are at least similar. You have Zomba, you have Longo there. For Kameme, you have, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think it is Raha Cure. I'm not super sure, but they're a very good sword player. They just got 9th place at a regional. And then for Sonics, you have Peli, who Lugi probably does have experience against because they're both from the UK. So he's got at least some matchup experience, but it's kind of tough to predict how he's going to go. I'd say, honestly, his best matchup is probably against Zomba just because, you know, you can grab the robot and you can kill him, and Lugi will be killing you off of 1 grab. But that doesn't mean it's a good matchup for Luigi because you can still get edge guarded incredibly hard. So he's got a bit of a tough draw, but when you are the 16th seed, you're pretty much always going to get a tough draw, especially when Sonics is in your pool. Now, for Zomba, he also doesn't have a great pool because he is down against Kameme Lifetime and he's down against Sonic's Lifetime. So a little bit unlucky for him there. We could see secondaries from him. You know, I've been very impressed by his Lucina. Not that these are necessarily Lucina matchups. It would probably be Rob if it happened, but that's not a great draw. And for Sonic's Kameme, they're actually 1-1 Lifetime. They both played at Glitch Regen, and Kameme did win the last time they played. As both game 5s for both sets, so that could go either way. Again, if I had to bet, I bet Sonics because I bet Sonics against pretty much everyone because that guy is ridiculous. Our next pool is Shuton, Bloom, Yara, and Tilde, and for this one there's also not a ton of data. The only real crossover we have is Yara and Shuton, which is definitely not in Yara's favor. It is Shuton's favor 3-0 Lifetime, so not a great pull there, and also not a great pull for Bloom, considering that Bloom is an EU player and Shuton plays Olimar. So that's a little bit of a rough draw, and I also don't think that could be an amazing matchup for Bayonetta just because of how stubby Olimar is, but I'm not too sure about that. Whistle as well seems really annoying, but it could just be Aegis from Shuton as well. It's definitely a possibility. Then our final player versus Shuton would be Tilde. I honestly have no idea how that would go. I do think Falco does pretty well versus Olimar there, so it would probably be Falco Aegis, and Tilde is a player that definitely can beat Shuton. He is incredible. I also don't know how much experience Tilde has versus Aegis. It's always a big factor when the guys haven't really played before. Shuton, kind of the same thing. I don't know if he has a ton of experience versus Masa. There's not really any other super high level Falcos in Japan, at least to the level of Tilde, so Tilde might matchup check a couple people here, except Bloom, because Tilde has beaten Lima before. Now, it was at Riptide, it was a long time ago, and it was only one time they played, and Bloom and Lima play very different styles of Bayonetta, but you know what? He's got the game plan down. He can do it. That's definitely an upset that could happen. Yara as well. Yara's also a tough one just because Samus is a character that can literally win anything because of how strong they are in tournaments, so I think Yara has a shot versus both Bloom and Tilde. I think literally everyone in this pool could make upsets, could be anyone. I think the only unfavorable matchups are Shuton Yara, and then Shuton Bloom could be a little bit rough, but we could also see maybe a brawler from Bloom because, you know, his secondaries do go kind of crazy. Our next group is Mia, Asimo, Hiro, and Siski, and it's a bit of an unlucky draw for Siski just because all three of these players are from Japan, where you have both Yara and Toro, who are two amazing Samus players, but Samus is a character that most people are going to know how to play against, so it's not like he has a huge X factor on his side, and playing Samus, no one's going to know what to do. No, you got to know how to play against Samus at the top level. We haven't seen any of these matchups in practice, but I think Siski could take some. I don't think they're super in his favor, especially Mia. Mia would probably be his toughest one just because I think Game & Watch can give Samus some real troubles. As speaking of Game & Watch giving people troubles, though, the record between Asimo and Mia is 5-0 in Mia's favor. That is a very, very rough draw. And as for Mia and Hiro, I don't think they've ever actually played offline, but I can't imagine that's a good match for Bowser. That sounds like a rough time. So Mia, on paper, got one of the best groups he honestly could have gotten because I think Game & Watch does well against Samus. He destroys Asimo, and I think Game & Watch is pretty good versus Bowser as well. So Mia got a good draw. Asimo and Hiro, they're 1-1 lifetime, and I think the last time they played was at Umabor, where Asimo did win. So if you had to favor someone, you kind of want to give it to Asimo there, but Hiro is a player that could win literally any set. Asimo is, Siski is, all of these guys are insane. Upsets could happen, but you definitely got to favor Mia here. He is the first seed, so it does make sense. And our final four people of Onin, Yoshidora, Quid, and Jackal also have pretty much no data on each other. I will say Quid and Jackal have played once though, and Quid did manage to take that. It was 2 months ago, so that means Quid guaranteed to win there because no one would ever win the run back. And Yoshidora is kind of going to be the main topping point of this group because I have no idea how he's going to go. I don't know if any of these guys have experience versus Yoshi, and there are good Yoshis in NA, not even close to the caliber of Yoshidora, but there's a couple good ones. You know, Suarez is really good, Raptor is really good, there's a couple other ones. I'm sure Burst is another one I can think of, so I'm sure some of these guys might have Yoshi experience, but it's not going to be the caliber of Yoshidora, and honestly, I would give him the favor just for that reason, on top of the fact that we haven't really seen Onin or Quid in a long time at the super top level. Like, they've still been playing, they've still been doing well at the regionals they've been going to, but it hasn't been at this S tier level that you have to be on to beat Yoshidora. So if anyone's going to win this group, it would probably be him. And here we have our top 16 bracket. This Google Sheets was made, of course, by the lovely COOKIEMONSTERZ. Their stuff will be down below. And this is kind of what the bracket would look like if we go off seeding again. It wouldn't be exact because, one, this is Summit, nothing is predictable there, but two, this tournament isn't actually happening, so it doesn't really matter. Our first matchup being Sonics versus Yoshidora, and I'm going to guess Sonics for this one just because I feel like even though he probably won't know the Yoshi matchup super well, he is still playing Sonic. He is still a really good character, and Sonic is one of those characters that even though you're not super familiar with the matchup, you can just win anyway because your game plan is so strong. It's not going to be easy because Yoshidora does have experience against some of the best Sonics in the world. You have a couple really strong ones in Japan, but I'm going to give that one to Sonics. Then you have Shutone and Osmo, and I'm going to give this to Osmo just purely because he won the last time he played, as well as Osmo's been doing some of the best I've ever seen, whereas Shutone hasn't been doing as hot, but again, he did have that really strong one at Cal and won the entire thing through the loser side of bracket, so he's not washed by any means, but I'm going to give that one to Osimo. You have Mia and Bloom next, and I'm going to give this to Mia just because I think Game & Watch Bayonetta is a really tricky matchup, but it's not impossible. You know, you have Lima beating Meister at Lost Tech City, even though he did lose the run back, but those are two very different players. The matchup still is the kind of the same, so I'm going to give it to Mia. Bloom definitely could do it, and again, the Brawler could come out, maybe some other secondaries that I don't know about because I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe he just dittos Mia because that's like unironically a real possibility because Bloom is that good, but Bayonetta Game & Watch, I'm going to give that one to Mia. And for Onin Kameme, I'm going to give this one to Kameme because, he is 1-0 versus Akla, and again, Onin and Akla are different players, but Akla at this point is probably the best player in the world, and the fact that Kameme has never lost him, they've only played once, but he's never lost him, gives me extreme confidence in him, so I'm going to say Kameme gets that upset. On to the loser side of bracket, our first matchup is going to be Zombo versus Jackal, which is funny because these guys have actually played each other like 50 times, like a lot of times they have played. That's just how the bracket worked out. I swear I didn't rig it, and I'm going to guess Zombo for this one just because I feel like most of the times they play, it does go Zombo's favor, but it really is super back and forth and could go either way. Now we have Yara Siski, and this is the Samus Ditto. Again, I promise I didn't rig the bracket, but I'm going to give it to Siski just because, you know what, he's had that title of best Samus for a really long time, which means he's definitely the best Samus player in the Ditto, but that could honestly go either way. Again, Dittos are one of the most volatile matchups in this game because you have access to all your tools. It really is just who is playing better that day. Then you have Hiro versus Tilde. Now, I'm going to give this one to Tilde just because he does not lose versus these like super heavies. He will combo you for 1,000,000%. Hiro is a player player that can definitely overcome that, though. He has some of the best disadvantage state of the game. You kind of have to with a Bowser, but Tilde is just so good at beating people up, and you're not really getting to live super long because of how he uses down air, so gonna give that one to Tilde. And then finally you have Quid versus Luigi, and I'm gonna give this one to Quid just because Guy is in the region of Quid, and I don't know if they played a ton, but you know what, having a little bit of a Luigi experience, you kind of get the game plan of a don't grab, whereas there's not a ton of PTs in Europe, at least to my knowledge. Again, there could be a super good UK PT that I just don't know about, but I'm gonna give that one to Quid. In Losers 9th, our first matchup is going to be Onin versus Zomba, and I'm going to give this one to Onin just off the fact that they have played once at Let's Make Moves Miami, and Onin took that in a Game 5 set, and again, people never lose the runback, so that means Onin is guaranteed to win there. Obviously, Zomba can pull it out. I mean, Zomba's beaten Akla before. Again, two very different styles of Steve, but it's just showing that he knows what he's doing in the matchup. But still, I'm going to give that one to Onin. Bloom Siski, this is one I'm going to give to Bloom. Just off the recent sets, Bloom has been incredibly dominant. Shuton versus Tilde, I'm going to give this one to Tilde just because I think Falco has a good success versus Olimar, but I'm actually not going to give this one to Tilde because I remember that Shuton plays Aegis, and that's not as great of a matchup, at least in my opinion, as well as Shuton maybe having that experience versus Masa, and he's just such an established top player at this point. Like, it's really hard to bet against Shuton, but if you had to, Tilde is a player that definitely could take it against him, but for now, I'm going to give it to Shuton. And Yoshidora versus Quid, this is a repeat that we're seeing from the pool stage. I think Shuton Tilde was as well, but again, I'm going to give it to Yoshidora for the same reason of I just feel like there's a higher chance that Yoshidora knows the PT matchup better than Quid knows the Yoshi matchup. Also, I just looked it up, and apparently Falco gets whopped by Olimar, like that's one of his worst matchups, so just ignore what I was saying. I don't know the Falco matchup charts, and he would still lose to Shuton there, so at least I guessed right the first time. But in winner semis, we have Sonic versus Osimo, or Sonics versus Osimo, and I'm going to guess Sonics for this one just because I think the matchup is heavily in his favor. But there is the factors of, you know, Osimo's probably better at the Sonic matchup than Sonics is as the Ryu matchup. You know, you have a couple really good Sonic players in Japan, most notably Ken and Takai. That doesn't necessarily mean that Osimo has experience against those players, but I'd more favor him, at least in terms of the matchup experience, but also Sonic is just a better character than Ryu, and he has a lot of ways to break focus, which is a pretty big deal, you know, down B, up air, or forward air, like there's a ton of ways you can get out of that for Sonic, so I'm going to give that to him. You have Mia versus Kameme, which I'm also going to give to Mia just because he has been extremely dominant in that matchup. I don't know the last time he lost to Kameme, if ever, but lifetime, it is very heavily in Mia's favor. Our first matchup in Loser 7th is Onin versus Bloom. I'm going to give this one to Onin just because there isn't a ton of top-level Steer-ups in EU, at least in comparison to the dominance of the ones in NA, so Bloom might not be ready to fight a caliber of Steve like Onin, but you could also say that about Onin not being able to fight a top-level Bayonetta that Bloom definitely is, so that could honestly go either way, but if I had to pick unfamiliarity of characters, I would definitely favor the Steve there, just because if you don't know that matchup really well, you are going to get rocked. Then we have Shuton versus Yoshidora. It's 3-1 in Yoshidora's favor lifetime, so I'm just going to give him that win. He usually wins that set, and I wouldn't be surprised if he managed to do it again. In Losers Quarterfinals, our first matchup is Osimo versus Onin, and this is actually a matchup that Osimo is really good at. He's able to take a set off Akla, so I'm going to give him that win there. It's not free guaranteed just because you know how to play against the character doesn't mean you're going to win, which is a big misconception I feel like a lot of people have. Just because you know the Steve matchup doesn't mean the Steve player can still better player you. Like, the Steve players at this level are still incredibly talented. You need to both beat the character and the player. I think Osmo will be able to handle it, though, just because of how good he was looking versus Akla in Kagaribi Grants. Even though he didn't win, it was like one slip up that kind of gave Akla all the momentum, and I really think that Osmo could pull it off versus Onin. Then you have Kameme versus Yoshidora. Now, this isn't a matchup that we see a ton, but all the times that we have seen it, I'm pretty sure it has gone in Yoshidora's favor, so I'm just going to bet him to do it again. And our top four is Sonics, Mia, and Osimo. Yoshidora, for loser semis, I'm going to guess that Yoshidora wins that just because it is 3-1 in his favor lifetime, but Osimo has taken a set before, and his adaptation lately has been super impressive, so not impossible, but based off the records, you got to go Yoshidora. In winners finals, though, we have Sonics and Mia, who have never played before, so I'm going to guess that Mia catches Sonics a little bit off guard. You know, he's not ready for this type of Game & Watch. He hasn't played a ton of the matchup, as well as Mia having a bit of experience. You know, he's done pretty well versus Ken. I don't know if he's ever played versus Takai, but if he has, he's probably won that because Mia is actually very good at the Sonic matchup, so I'm going to guess Mia wins that one. In Losers Finals, we have Sonic Yoshidora in the run back, and this time I think it only favors Sonic's more just because his adaptation is so strong. Now he's going to know Yoshidora's game plan much better because, you know, they've played before in bracket. He's going to kind of understand Yoshi better, so if he wins it the first time, I definitely think he can win it the second time. And in Grand Finals, I'm going to predict that Sonic's adaptation wins him the bracket. He gets the reset because Sonic's in the grand finals is incredibly scary. And fun fact, Sonics has never lost a tournament that he was in the grand finals of at least a major. Now it's only been one, but you know what? He won the whole thing, so I'm going to say he does it this time. And I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Again, this bracket isn't actually happening. None of these matchups are going to happen for a little bit. Hopefully we see some of them soon, especially at Battle BC. But huge shout outs to Tlanesi for this idea. It's just a really fun one. If you guys have any ideas like this or something else you want to see me do, please leave them down below. Sport's been absolutely unreal lately. I thank you guys for everything, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.